Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Mascha, and as always, I'm here with Elena Berg from Paris. A famous water sommelier once said, "Water shouldn't be a dry topic." And so we decided today, after talking for many hours, to actually taste some waters. And I'm very happy to be here today with Martin Riese, famous water sommelier, and my good friend. We both started recently the Fine Water Academy, and welcome to Martin in Los Angeles.
Hello, Michael. It's so nice to be here, obviously in a very warm environment. It's for sure 90 degrees already in my apartment. It's pretty early in the morning here in Los Angeles. For me, like restaurant business, 9:30 in the morning. But I don't have my air conditioner on because I don't like the sound of the air conditioner on the podcast. So bear with me. I'm very happy that we are drinking some water today because I need to get hydrated.
Hello. Thank you so much for putting this all together. We are going to try some water. My name is Elena Berg, and I am a recent graduate of the Fine Water Academy, so I am now a certified water sommelier. And yes, I'm very excited to try some water. I'm located in Paris, France, so we'll be looking at some French waters today.
So let's start drinking some water. We have some waters here that we have mentioned during the show, and I will showcase and talk about this, but I really want to start with something that I find very fascinating. It's natural carbonated water. The carbonation is already in the water when the water emerges, and I have two really nice examples here. Both are from Portugal. One is from the Azores, the other one is from the northern part of Portugal, and they're both naturally carbonated. So I'll start with a water called Pedras. And what you will notice with this water is it has a very high mineral content. The mineral content has a TDS of about 2,800, so which is very strong. You hear the bubbles feel big, but when you actually taste the water, the bubbles are surprisingly soft, and the water doesn't feel like it has this high TDS. So it has a very nice full-bodied water, but not the super high minerality you would expect from just looking at the number.
Do you know, Michael, how is that possible for Pedras? Because I know Pedras as well. I have it here right in front of, actually, I can see Pedras in my little water closet, what I'm calling it. And I'm always fascinated about Pedras. It's one for me, like one of the most unique waters I ever drunk so far, because yes, the TDS is pretty high. When you open it, you think the carbonation, oh my God, there's a lot of going on. You're putting it in your glass, like, okay, that's gonna be like an intense water, like Vichy what I have here, or maybe a Gerolsteiner. But then suddenly on the taste panel, it's completely the opposite. It's more like a Hilden from the carbonation. It's quite fascinating. Do you know how that is that possible?
Yeah, I think what's happening with Pedras is that it has a very low sulfur level, and that's why you don't feel it so much. It also doesn't have any smell. Usually when you have waters, and when you taste the Vichy later, you will probably notice that it has a smell. Pedras has no smell, and the bubbles are really, really nice, nicely generated and integrated. Elena, what waters do you have for us?
Yeah, so today I have 5. We'll see where we get. But I wanted to do an array of different TDS values, so different minerality. And I also wanted to pick different parts of France, because different parts of France have very different traditions with their kind of culture of drinking water. So today I'm going to start with one called Celtic. This is a very low TDS water, it's a TDS of about 50. And it's from the eastern part of France. I've actually never tasted it before, so it'll be a kind of fun experience for me. The next one I have is called L'Alsace, which is a pretty classic water. I know it's one that you're both very familiar with. I absolutely love the bottle. I'll admit that I've been seduced by the packaging. It's a beautiful bottle designed by an artist. And it's a smooth water, so it's about 206, TDS of 206. And then it's from the Megep, so this is way up in the mountains, sort of a mountain spring water. Next, I've got one called Planquette, which is, I think, the only mineral water in Brittany. So it's kind of a neat example of a small water that has a neat little story to it that I'll tell you a little more about. And then actually just kind of inspired by what you're just talking about with how you can have these different mineralities and different carbonations and really different effects. One of my favorite waters in France is Vermandois, and part of the reason why I love this water is that it's very, very high TDS, over 2,000, but it's very smooth. So it's low sodium and it has this really complex, really interesting set of flavors. And then finally I have Saint-Geron, which is another very classic, famous water, partly because I didn't want to go with what in France is probably the most prestigious water still, or most well-known prestigious, which is Chateau d'Eau. I thought, let's try something a little different, similar, fairly high TDS level, naturally carbonated, from the same area of Auvergne, so these volcanic mountains. So a huge array of different kinds of climates, microclimates, different kind of rocks and flavors.
And it's so funny that you're saying, oh my God, like the classic 1650 Chateau d'Eau. Trust me, I would kill people for that water here over in America. I would love to have that water on my water menu. It's not accessible in America. It's too bad. I would love to have it. I think it's an incredible good water. I had it on my water menu in Germany, but I have Saint-Geron on my water menu. So that's the only water from France what I actually have on my water menu currently. There are other brands, obviously, the Perrier, for example. Obviously, Evian, I have Evian as well, so sorry about this, my second French water. But Saint-Geron is great. I love Saint-Geron. That's a very, very good classic water, what you just said as well. I like it.
So is it because they just don't export? Is it that different companies have different laws about what they export where, or different?
So, yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Maybe it's like smaller brands recognitions, and then they're saying, you know what, we have enough sales here in France, we don't want to expand, or maybe they cannot even expand, like what Badois just did, that they have the issues about their spring source, that they cannot actually pour so much water out what they would love to sell. So they said, hey, we have to bail out of UK and the American market. So maybe that is something with Chateau d'Eau or like smaller brands as well. I haven't seen Celtic here. I not even know, what was this? Villiconfront? Sorry, I'm so bad at that.
Villeneuve-Froid. I love this water. Yeah, this is yeah, it's not a terribly old. Most of these waters have very, very ancient sources. So a lot of them are the sort of Roman spas, Roman baths. So this is an old source, but it's I can't remember exactly when it was started up, but in 20 years ago, something like that.
I'm very excited about that, because that would really interest me what you said, like low sodium but high TDS. That's always very, very interesting for me. I love that, because sodium is mostly what carries the TDS and what brings the TDS number pretty high. So it's very unusual to have like a high TDS water with low sodium. That's always interesting for me.
Yeah, I think
exactly.
One is that they have reached a production limit and they don't have enough water, so they're focusing on the main area for. But I think Saint-Geron is almost a very good replacement for Chateau d'Eau, because it's actually very, very similar. Doesn't have quite the name recognition, but it's very similar. Coming back, it looks like I'm the only one who's actually tasting water. You guys are only talking about the water. So I will taste my next water, and then, Martin, you need to talk about the water. So Portugal, very high TDS, almost 3,000, naturally carbonated. Fairly recently, I discovered a water called Magnificat. It's from the Azores. It's an island in the Atlantic, belongs to Portugal. It's also a volcanic island, and they have a naturally carbonated water there. And the amazing thing with this natural carbonated water is that it has a TDS of 240. So very, very low TDS. It's very rare that you have a naturally carbonated water with low TDS, because the carbonation usually helps absorb additional minerals. So it must be very hard rocks around where the source is, so it doesn't allow it to absorb so many minerals. And usually you cannot have naturally carbonated water with fish or lighter and subtler dishes because of the power of the TDS. With this water, it's absolutely perfect. Also, the bubbles are very, very fine. It's what we call effervescent. So very, very tiny bubble. It straddles the line between still water and the sparkling water.
Is it also a PET? It's a plastic bottle?
This one is in PET. They're working on getting a glass bottle done because I encourage them, because I think it's a really, really special water. You know, Martin, most of the water is high TDS, very special to have a low TDS water here.
Yeah, that's the reason. It's like I'm fascinating already.
So what are you drinking, Martin?
So let's start with a classic Fiji water from the Fiji Islands. And everybody would say here in America now, like, oh my God, this is something I pick up at the gas station. And then in Germany, you're saying, oh, I'm picking that up at the KaDeWe, at the luxury retailer. So it's quite fascinating. And when Michael and myself talked a little bit about Fiji Islands, and I know, Michael, you lived even on the Fiji Islands, we are always thinking, okay, this is now the #1 consumed like premium brand here in America, so everybody knows it. But then when you think about other countries, it's actually a very, very unique and very special water because they don't have it so much in other countries. So here in America, it's something normal, but that doesn't mean it's not an interesting water. It's the same with Vichy Catalan, where this is something very fancy here in America. And it's always so funny when I see people like saying, oh my God, Martin and the fancy waters. And then from Spain, somebody will say, so you're drinking the dollar water, what I picked up in my grocery store. Vichy Catalan is the #1 consumed sparkling water in Spain. So again, all the waters, what we're always tasting, what Michael tastes, what Elena tastes, that doesn't mean they're all fancy. For us, it's not about fancy, about the product, about the name or something. It's about the uniqueness of the spring. And that is quite fascinating. So Fiji is actually very unique in the spring because Fiji comes from a Artesian spring and has a high silica content, a very unusual high silica content. Pacific Rim waters, where obviously Fiji is located as well, are known for the silica content and for the higher silicon content, but Fiji is really one of the brands who has the highest silica content. And silica is a natural occurring mineral, what makes the water very smooth on the palate and very velvety. So let's see if that is actually true, what I'm saying, because I didn't taste the water yet. Oh yeah, it's a still water. They don't have a carbonated water, and they're saying it's untouched by mankind. So therefore, the idea for them to like add carbonation to it, it's not an option because they're saying, no, we just want to take the water out, what it is like this from our artesian spring, put it into the bottle, and then ship it around the world. I would love to see it. This is a PET bottle. That's a ½ liter. I would love to see a glass bottle as well. I think that would be a killer actually to have a glass bottle in a square, this unique square format. I think it would be incredible good. I know, and Michael can maybe talk about this a little bit. I know Fiji is very remote. I don't think that they have a glass manufacturer on the Fiji Islands. And I think that's one of the reasons they don't do it, because they don't want to ship, obviously, from another island, all the glass containers over to Fiji, then putting water in there and then shipping it back to wherever they need to have it. So I understand the concept, why they might be not doing it. But hopefully they will come up with other ideas, maybe a 5-gallon package that you can have a reusable bottle or something like this. I would love to see Fiji a little bit moving in some other directions than just PET. And I think this is the new way of life, and we all should think about the containers where we're actually putting the water in it. But it is a very, very smooth and very velvety water. And Michael talked a little bit about fish dishes as well. I think Fiji is great actually for sushis. So like for very, very light dishes, because the TDS is not that high, 222. It's like medium, in the medium range. I think it's great for spicy food actually, because it's so velvet and a little bit thicker on the palate, and it really washes out like very spicy food components, and you get a little bit more aroma coming out of your food. So I really like that about Fiji. So Fiji is for me a very unique water, what you can actually pick up everywhere when you're living in America. What is nice.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about the glass versus the plastic is exactly right. I think that they made the decision because they were so remote that they could, so it's very easy. One of the great advantages of PET is that you can actually produce your own bottles on site. So with relatively, if you have a big production, then actually producing your own bottles on site is super easy, right? You just have to have these little plastic pellets that you bring in. I think the backlash against Fiji was about it's a kind of claiming to be carbon neutral when it really wasn't quite there yet. And this is something that actually Michael and I talked about with regards to greenwashing, when companies really want to appeal to people's environmental sense, but they haven't quite gotten there. I think they've taken a lot of steps in the last few years to actually get there. So I think they're actually making that step. But this transition to glass, which people really like to see just because it's a really nice thing to have on the table, isn't something they've done. Most of these a lot of these waters do come in PET as well. So the Celtic is a fairly low-end water. It's only about €1.50 per liter. So it sells a lot in plastic. So actually, what container water is in is one of the really interesting questions we've been trying to answer in this series.
Yeah, very good. I notice you still haven't started drinking your water, and I'm already on my third bottle here. So next time we come to you, you need to promise us to at least try one of the waters. In our show, we talked about waters that, from the beginning, as Elena was saying, integrate the story about the environment and how conscious they want to be about preserving the environment into their brand story. And this is a classic water. It's Antipodes from New Zealand, Bay of Plenty. And from the beginning, they made an effort in trying to be carbon neutral, trying to have recycling done, and really focusing on making environmentally conscious decisions. And it's one of the classic waters in the fine water category. This bottle was designed or came out in 2003. It has not changed. This bottle is 17 years old. There has no change been made. It was, in my opinion, a perfect example of a water. This is a 1 liter water. It has a fairly low TDS, about 120. It's a Pacific Rim water. It also has a high silica level. And it's, again, perfect for this light and subtle food dishes. So one of the big classic waters in the category, Antipodes. Martin?
What I love about Antipodes is, first of all, Michael, you're absolutely right. I love the packaging. It's still incredibly cool to see this on the tables, especially the 1 liter is quite fascinating because it's a pretty big bottle. And on the table, it's like, it's just stamped there. It's like, wow, that's like a bottle of water. Then what you said about the shape, yes, I think it's like a Porsche 911. So they don't need to be like redesigning that whole thing. That thing is just perfect. In the shape, everything is just great about it. And the water, what's actually in there, is very, very good too. And I think that's always an interesting topic. And I see this for a lot of water companies. They're over-designing their packaging, but the product inside is completely not in focus anymore. I just reached out yesterday to a water company who I didn't know that they exist. I reached out to them because on their homepage, they don't talk at all about where actually their water is coming from and what's actually in there. They're saying there's electrolytes, but they don't say how many. And that is a classic case, again, of marketing, of, oh, we want to create something special that people may be getting attractive to, putting some buzzwords on the bottles. Alkaline is always a buzzword. Oxygenated is another buzzword. pH obviously is a buzzword. And then pure is obviously the biggest buzzword ever. And we already know that pure on a water bottle is actually that's meaningless, completely meaningless. So they didn't respond yet to me. And I have a feeling that that water is nothing else than obviously filter tap. And they will have a hard time to, in my opinion, sell it. So it will be interesting to see that. But anyhow, Antipodes is an incredible good water because it's very funny. When you're drinking that water, it has a slightly chill feeling to it. It's very unusual because we're drinking always our waters in room temperature. When you drink Antipodes, it feels colder than the other waters. It's very interesting. And I have a feeling that's one of the reasons why they're always winning the Berkeley Water Tasting Competition, one of the famous competitions where it comes to tasting competitions around the world. They won it several times already because, let's face it, Americans love to drink their water chilled. And when they think it's chilled, they might be tasting it better and they think it's tastier, that water. So I have a feeling that Antipodes is always winning because it seems like that water is chilled. It is a great water, but there's more to discover than just the idea of chilling. But we talked about the Petrus, and you said, Michael, it's almost like an effervescent water, and I have one here, gently sparkling, the British water, Hilden, one of my favorite waters for tastings, because a lot of people cannot believe how tiny bubbles can get. And when you look at the glass, yes, you see the bubbles right away. It's actually pretty intense, the bubbles. But when you taste them, it's the same effect with Petrus. It's very, very easy to drink and swallow. It's like super nice, super round bubbles. It feels very, very good. No wonder the Queen loves to drink it as well. It's the official water of the Buckingham Palace. And I'm always saying in my tastings, be careful, guys. When you're drinking too much Hilden, your arm will do suddenly like this or like this or like that. So be careful. I think it's a great water. Elena, do you know Hilden from Britain?
Yes, I do, and it's one of it is one of the waters that I see a lot here. Generally not in restaurants, so you have to kind of go out of your way to find it. But all of the UK waters are pretty accessible here. So the Speyside Glenlivet is also often in restaurants, but certainly in kind of the bigger, more specialized stores. So there's a whole series of waters from the UK. It's nice being kind of in Europe, being able to sample a lot of these waters that may not be as easy for people to find in the US. I'm gonna jump the queue here since I am really thirsty and I haven't had a chance to taste water yet. So this is Celtic. This is the one that's 50 TDS. One of the things I love about this store, so this is from the Vosges region in the east of France. And it's called Celtic because this was a source that the Romans loved. But even before the Romans, they found a statuette of a Celtic goddess in this area right by the source. And so it's named for this Celtic goddess. So the idea that people have been drinking this and revering this water for a long time. So low TDS, around 50. It should be really smooth, but I've never tried it. As I said, this is a water that is available also in PET. It's one that people commonly get at the supermarket. Yeah, really smooth. So there's another water. Have you guys had, I'm terrible with my pronunciation still, but Trignac. It's another water that actually is in most of the big supermarkets here. It's a very common water. That's a TDS of around 20, and it has a kind of slippery, some of the low TDS waters have a slightly kind of slippery quality.
Bottle or red bottle, Tunant?
No, it's not the Welsh one. It's a French one. It's Trignac. So as you see, the French and the pronunciation, I've been here several years and I haven't been able to get with it. But this is a much less slippery kind of a water. It has a really light, easy flavor. And as I said, it's been sort of in the culture for a long time. I think it's only been bottled since 1988, so the mid-80s.
It's interesting. I mean, you mentioned the word slippery, and I don't think you mean it in a bad way. And where the slippery sometimes comes from is the pH. And we have a similar water here, Icelandic glacial. I think it has a TDS of about 70, so a little bit more of what Elena is currently drinking. But it has a pH of 8.4, so it's very alkaline. Again, what I love about Icelandic is they don't make any kind of alkaline claim. They just put the higher pH here. And we also mentioned this water, and we wanted to show the bottle. We also mentioned this water in our show because pretty much founded at the same time, very early 2000. They also made the conscious decision of integrating the environmental concerns right away into the water. Very early carbon neutral certification, and having the advantage of coming from Iceland. Even the production itself is carbon neutral because they can use the thermal energy, so they have a renewable energy. So it's again a brand we wanted to show because we mentioned it in our talk about this integration into the environment, the brand into the environmental consciousness. And the 8.4 is also the indication that the water has a little bit of this kind of slippery, softer feeling, even if it wears a low TDS content. Martin?
Oh, can I jump in here with another environmental message? So Antipodes, I wanted to follow up on that too, is one of these really great waters with this solid environmental message. They don't mince words. They only produce what's been ordered, so they don't actually bottle any more than they need at any one time. And Icelandic glacials also got a really good track record, in part because of this geothermal access, right? Iceland is fueled by geothermal energy, which is very friendly to the earth. So it's kind of a neat connection there with the environmental stuff we've been talking about in previous episodes.
I think that's incredible. Like, I saw the first episode on the Zac Efron show where I've been featured on the second episode. The first episode is about Icelandic. And I just watched it with my wife, and I was fascinating about the environmental, like how advanced they obviously are and what they can use. What was a little weird for me when Zac said something like, oh, America should do the same. You know, it's like, it's not that easy because first of all, America has slightly more population than Iceland has. That's like a little bit more millions living here. And obviously they have totally different environments. It's like when you dig there for like 20 centimeters, there's energy coming out of the grounds. And when I dig here 20 centimeters in the ground in Hollywood, nothing will happen. Maybe somebody will say, are you nuts? Some homeless person will approach me and say, you're crazy. So therefore, I think it's like the idea of, oh, we can match this to every single country does not work these days. I think it always depends like how big the country is, how industrial the country is, how much energy do they need. And then making the idea, obviously, how can we get rid, for example, of obviously nuclear power, what is, we all know, I think it's not the right choice to have. And obviously it might be easy to use and you can put a lot of energy out of nuclear power, but in the long run, this will hurt us very badly. And so in Germany, for example, Germany is a high industrial country. Since the 80s, they're starting with solar or wind energy. Wind energy is pretty big, especially where I'm coming from up north. What I think is incredible and good. So I know that the first windmill was built in '89 when in my very, very small little village where I'm coming from, they're living 500 people. Suddenly we have 2 big windmills standing there in '89 already. What I think is incredible. So that is a good part, but we need to see like to which country we are talking about. So you cannot match Icelandic to obviously the American states. That's a little bit easy to say.
Yeah, very good point. It's really geography is destiny for sources. And some of the brands, so most of the brands now address the environmental concerns. Some of the brands also address the shipping issues. You know, Fiji water produced in Fiji, shipped, you know, to the US, a big 5,000 miles in between. You know, I think we should be able to do it because it's a special water. You want to have that experience. You can only get it from this water, not from another water. But what we see with some brands is that they focus on a region, on a regional area. And there's a very nice water we recently discovered from Germany, Radius 99, Radius 99. It's a very, very small production, and we have virtually visit the production. It's actually really in the garage, and it's hand-filled bottle. But from the beginning, in the brand, they made the decision, we deliver the water only 99 miles from where we live. And we have the water, Martin has the water. It doesn't mean they don't ship it to us, but their focus of the delivery is the regional area. And I think that is a very interesting concept that addresses a lot of the issues currently. And we talked about the show.
I think, Michael, what you just said about Radius 99, a German brand, and this is something very unique, I think, in Germany. I think it's something in Italy and France for sure the same. We have in Germany over 500 different mineral water brands. Think about this, 500 different mineral water brands. When you think about the size of Germany, so the state of California is 2.5 sizes bigger than the whole country of Germany. So Germany is actually pretty small. Whole Europe is pretty small compared to the United States. So we have so many different mineral water brands in Germany, and pretty much every location has its own brand, and they're all drinking that. So therefore, we have so much diversity in the stores as well, because all these different brands are pretty much in a radius of maybe 90 kilometers, 100 kilometers surrounding. You will not find a Bavarian water up north where I'm coming from, and vice versa. So that is the interesting part about Germany, that you're traveling through Germany and you can discover so many amazing different brands because they're all local. I love this. Local waters, I think it's a great concept.
It's a great concept. And if you look at the other water we talked about, Tahoe Artesian, they also say the same thing with a local choice. You know, there may be a couple of 100,000 people living around 99 miles around radius. But 8 or 9 million people live where what Tahoe Artesian calls local, because it's the San Francisco regions, Lake Tahoe, and they consider San Francisco, the city, as the local water. But again, a very interesting concept in a high-end presentation in glass. If you have a fine dinner in a fine restaurant, you don't have to have a water imported from Italy or from any other place. You also have now a local choice, and I think that's a very good thing. So Elena, are you going to taste some more waters for us?
Yes, I am. And I also want to repeat that in France, it's a similar concept, I think, to Germany. I think Germany trumps France in terms of just the sheer number of mineral waters. I think in France, it's more like 100 that are sort of certified official waters, but people are very attached to their region. So I'm actually going to skip Alsace because I seem to be behind in my tasting, and I'm going to move straight to Planquette, which is this little village in Brittany. And what I like about this water, it's actually owned by a bigger group now, but it still has a small business model. What I like about this water is that they've made the decision to make this water accessible to everybody who lives in that area. So there's sort of a housed area where you can go in with your carboys, with your big bottles, and you can fill up your bottles with that water anytime if you come from that area. Because for some of these brands, there's been tension, not so much with these small brands, I think, but when Michael and I were talking about the bigger companies that are really bottling tap water, they are often taking water away from local environments and local people. So I kind of love this idea that this is a water rooted in the small town that it's in. So I'm going to try that. This is a fairly low TDS water. It's around 250, 257. I just watched a video about their production process and their the little house where people could go and get their water. It's really nice. Yeah, so even I can definitely tell the difference between the Celtic, which was so low, right, this 50 TDS of 50, to now we've bumped it up a little bit, and there's a little more complexity in the flavors, but it's still really mellow, easy to drink. Yeah, yum. I could imagine why people would want to go and fill their bottles with that.
Elena, it was very interesting. You just said for a second ago about the environmental impact and then the source in general. And I think we didn't really talk about this, that obviously bottled water has an impact on the environment. We all know that. I think like it's stupid to say, no, this is the best for nature and there's nothing bad for the environment. Obviously bottled water has an impact, like everything else has an impact on the environment. When I'm standing up in the morning, when I'm washing my head, when I'm taking off my clothes, when everything what I'm doing, it has an impact on the environment. I think we all need to be aware of that we as human beings obviously have an impact on the environment. When we're breathing, when we're living, everything has an impact. But obviously, and this was very interesting for me that you just said this, the difference between a purified water brand and a real water brand, what actually sources natural occurring source spring water. And especially in Europe, because the regulations are very strict in Europe. So here, what you just said, when there's a purified water brand and they're just taking kind of like tap water or water what should be for the people, they're just taking it and then bottling it. Versus a spring source, and in Europe especially, a spring source is not allowed to be tapped when it's first of all a spring source what maybe could disappear. Then you're not even allowed to touch it as a spring source. And you're just allowed to take so much water out by what it comes automatically back into the spring from the water cycle. That's required by law in Europe. And I don't know, Michael, this is required by law in America as well about natural occurring spring sources from America. But I know the regulations in Europe are clearly about that. that they're saying you're not allowed to dig into a spring and take too much water out, that you actually off-balance Mother Nature. What I think is incredible. And I think it's so important, therefore, especially the European brands, I'm a very big fan of, because I know that they don't have an impact on the nature from a perspective of water shortage, for example. What do you think about this, Michael? Is there something regulated? Do you know that?
Yeah, I think America is slightly different. I think large companies here are basically able to create their own laws by, you know, buying officials through money contributions. So I think what's happening here is the laws are very, very lax and very much in favor of the large companies. And you see the big Nestle problems we have around Poland Springs, and everywhere we go, you know, over extracting waters. And Elena and I talked at length in our show about exactly what you mentioned here. Elena, do you have another water for us? Something with lots of minerals?
Yeah, I think I'll transition into this Velmenfoire, which is also has what's interesting about this water is that it's got several designs. So it has this old sort of classic model. I think this must be an original label from some earlier era, or at least a play on that. And then they also have this other shape, which has these, you can't really see it super well here, but there are all kinds of swirls and you know, that obviously is playing on this idea of water and flowing water. And it comes in glass and in plastic. They've definitely sort of tapped into all these different possible markets. So this is, as I said, a really high TDS water. It's 2010. So this is up in the area where generally when you have waters that are at this level, and there's often a lot of salt in them, and they often have a sharper, more kind of immediate sort of flavor. What struck me about this water when I first tried it was just how smooth it was for how high the TDS levels are. So I'm gonna open this little one. This one. This, one thing I actually wanted to ask both of you about is this tendency for waters to have both the natural still and a carbonated version. This seems to be, at least the waters that I'm seeing here in Europe, they almost always, if they are naturally still, they almost always have a carbonated partner. It's a slightly different color or shape. If it's naturally carbonated, sometimes they actually will sell the one where the gas has been removed. But anyway, we can move on to that, but let me taste this one, see what it's like. Oh, I just love this water. It's, you don't want to drink too much of it. I mean, it sneaks up on you, maybe because of this lack of sodium, right? That normally you would slow down with a water like that because it's salty and you've kind of had enough. Whereas this water, you have the tendency to keep drinking. It's really smooth.
It's really interesting. So is this a still water? The still water has 2000 TDS?
Yes, this is a naturally still water. And then they sell a carbonated version of it, right? It has the artificial carbonation added in. But again, I always notice that waters are paired in this way. And is that true in the US as well?
Yeah, we do have, you know, if you have just a still water, the demand from the restaurants and from Horeca is still in sparkling. You know, we believe it's not a choice, but people need, so if you have a still water, you artificially carbonate the water. And many brands, if you have naturally carbonated water, you also don't put the carbonation back in and have a still water. But I'm amazed that 2000 TDS water without natural carbonation. It's very rare, and we like those waters, Martin, don't we?
Yeah, I'm literally like sitting here. It's like, I want to drink this now. It's like, give it to me. I'm super jealous, Elena, huh? I think it's fascinating. Is the small bottles PET or is it glass too?
So they have more different kinds of bottles of like any brand I've seen here. They have little PET bottles. They have big PET bottles. They have big glass bottles that look like this, and they have this one sort of with the classic old label on it. So I don't know exactly why they have so many different versions, but maybe also just because they're playing with this concept of design, right? Like depending on what you're eating, what you're doing, you know, we did talk about choices and how we make choices. And sometimes if you're going to have a little bottle like this that's PET, this is probably not one that you're going to serve at your restaurant, right? This is one you'll take and throw in your bag, right? So this is a company that's thought about all the different ways that people enjoy water. Michael and I have talked a lot about how we need to think about the choices that we make, but that you know, there are so many ways in which water is symbolic, and so many reasons why we react strongly to water being in plastic bottles, even when the environmental impact may not be that high, especially for these small companies.
It's interesting for me. I have a feeling with that particular brand that they're saying, okay, we have maybe two different markets we want to cater to. The younger generations, they want something a little bit more modern, a little bit more sportive, like going to the yoga, something like that. And then the classic version, what's standing right next to you in the glass bottle, that's maybe more like the version for the restaurant. That's my guess. Because we have, for example, a very famous brand, Apollinaris or Gerolsteiner. They have different versions too in Germany. They have glass bottles just for the restaurant business, that the restaurant can say, okay, I can now charge you 6 or 7 or 8 euros per bottle. And then they have exactly the same water in a glass bottle, but in a totally different glass bottle, just for retail. And the retail bottle will not go to the restaurant, and the restaurant bottle will not go into retail. So I have that feeling that might be the similarity right there with that company, that they have a restaurant version. You will find that in the restaurants, and then the other version is more like for whatever concept they're gonna do. But in Germany, that's quite often that you have one brand with like 4 or 5 different bottle shapes, and it really depends to which outlet they are catering that water. But it's actually exactly the same water.
Yeah, and I do all of my grocery shopping for water at the Le Grand Épicerie, which is this marvelous old supermarket in central Paris that has a famous kind of water aisle that's just full of different kinds of waters. And so I think they also like to get the different packaged versions of each thing to showcase kind of the diversity. So they'll have the wall of glass bottles, and then you walk around the corner and the other wall is of the PET bottles, often of the same water. So I think there's a lot of playfulness also in this, but I think you're right, Martin. It just depends on the context in which people are drinking the water.
Yeah, fascinating. I was also thinking, you know, our show here, Elena and my show, we call it Water's Not Just Water. And we just talked for almost an hour about water, and we drank water, you know, like it's wine. You know, you have many shows like this where people talk about wine. I think ours here is the only one that talks about water. And we can see how it has changed, you know. For example, when I started about, 18 years ago with Fine Waters in the US, I could not get people to drink what we consider, high mineral content water, and they didn't like sparkling water. So this was a big no-no. If you tell people that's very high in mineral, I don't want to drink it, it's sparkling, I don't want to drink it. And things have really changed, and Martin has helped tremendously with this aspect. And there was always a water that, and I think Martin has the same feeling, there was always a water we used to scare people, right? When you want to tell them water is not just water, you give them something they know, and you give them something they don't know. And this water was always Vichy Catalan, and people said, no, I don't like it, I don't want it, those kind of things. But recently, Martin, you have made Vichy Catalan famous. You made it sell out in countries around the world.
Yeah, it's interesting, but you're right, Michael. A lot of people always say like, oh my God, Vichy, this is salt water, this is ocean water, this is Pacific water, this is like, they came up with all these crazy ideas. And for me, again, this is a water, of course, this is, when people saying like, nah, Martin, I don't believe you. Nah, it's all the same. It's like, I cannot believe that water has taste, and no, this is all scam, and you're the biggest scam artist on the world, and all this kind of thing. What people said to me already is saying, okay, let's try Vichy. Huh? And then you're trying Vichy with your guests, and they're like, oh my God, what is that? And this is not even for me the heaviest one. Like, I can even bring then the next level is then Roy, what Michael and myself know very well too. And Roy is even way more intense than Vichy. Vichy has a TDS of 3054, Roy has a TDS of 7,400. And by Roy, the magnesium content of Roy is so high that it's very metallic on the palate. Because by Vichy, the balance, I think here, the most component is sodium, and then all other minerals are nicely combined too as well. So here it's a little bit more focused on the slightly saltier note, versus Roy is clearly depending on the more metallic note. I have another water here from Slovenia with a TDS of 28,000. You don't want to drink that. That's like, I have the bottle right in front of me. It's a very old traditional brand too. I had this for like, I think the last time I opened one of these bottles was for 2 years ago. And that water is not enjoyable anymore. It's super high in sulfur. It's very intense in flavors. It's like a medicinal water, so that is not for hydration anymore. Like Roy. Roy is not a hydration product. It's like my whiskey in a whiskey tumbler for me. It's like in very small amounts, and you're drinking that, and that is clearly a dietary supplement. Roy.
Did you say 28,000?
28,000 TDS. Yeah, I will bring that bottle.
Because salt water or ocean water is like 35,000, right? So we're talking almost the same level of minerality as ocean salt water.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. It tastes like ocean water.
Here we go.
Wow.
And this is for sure, you can't drink this anymore, because I have this bottle like for many, many years now here, and you see it deformed, and you see already in there, it's floating all the minerals now in there. They are like not dissolved anymore in water, but when I received that water, it was completely clear. Yeah, also a little bit, 28,380 is the TDS. That's quite something. But it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating. And again, this is something what a lot of people in America, and what Michael said in the beginning, why Vichy is suddenly so attractive to people, because here in America, it was just about hydration. And in Europe, it was exactly the other way around. People went to the spa towns in Europe because they know they want to treat themselves on these waters. And trust me, medication was not invented for 200 years ago. So they treating themselves on this. This was medication. This was not hydration. And I think that is a very interesting part, that the culture difference between America and Europe is so different when it comes to water, because Michael just said it. Still low TDS because they think it's tap water. Most of the water comes actually tap water. That's the crazy part about it here. And in Europe, you barely have any purified water brands. I know just one water brand in Germany, it's Bon Aqua, owned by Coca-Cola. And that is a purified water brand. That's the only one I actually know, but nobody drinks that. It's like from the guns when you're going to McDonald's, okay, it's a water option there. Bon Aqua, Coca-Cola, Diet Coke, and then you have that. But in the grocery store, nobody will buy that. There's just like, no, why? We want mineral water. So it's very fascinating.
The closest that we have to that, I would say, is a spring water that's from multiple sources. So that you do see that in supermarkets with sort of big 2-liter bottles of a sort of big company brand that's mixed its sources.
Correct. Tafelwasser, it's the German pronunciation for it. These are waters who can come from different sources. And we have one very famous Tafelwasser actually here. And I see it in the background of Michael. It's Nevas water. And that's the reason again, like the law needs to come up a little bit with the new ideas, because Nevas water is actually an incredible great water from 2 different sources. The TDS is 2,000, so it's clearly a mineral water, but they're not allowed to say it's a mineral water brand because it comes from 2 different sources. In Europe, the regulation is saying it has to come from one single source. Then it's a natural occurring mineral water. But that is clearly a mineral water because it comes from 2 different but natural occurring mineral water sources. But it's a cuvée. So I think there needs to be a little bit change of regulation at one point, and I would love to help Nevas to talk about this, and I did it already, because I think the regulations, I don't want to say need to be eased up, not at all. I love that Europe is very, very strict about the regulations, but I think they should be at least open-minded to the idea of oh, that makes actually sense to have two different mineral water sources coming together to one brand, and maybe they need to form it as a new way to say, but the word Tafelwasser for that, it's not fair to use that.
Yeah, as I understood it, in France they call it spring water, or in Europe in general. So if it's spring water, that's that the distinction between spring water and mineral water is that a spring water can, and I might be wrong about this, but I think it's, you know, in the fine print, can come from more than one source mixed into a single bottle. So there's room for that.
Here is that we are in the vanguard of the category, right? And the regulation haven't caught up to us yet. So we're pushing the envelope, and as usual, the regulation is behind us. But again, it was fascinating for me after, you know, talking to Elena for many, many hours about the water now, that we were able to show you how different waters are. You know, we were engaged, we tasted different waters. You can clearly, you couldn't taste the waters, but you could clearly see from our expressions and the way we explained the waters, how different the waters can be. And we talked about you can match water with food, the many different experiences. We hinted at that, and you can enjoy it. And what we also do sometimes, we do water tasting competition, where we have blind tasting competition, like with wine, where there's a jury and people taste water blindly. And I think, Elena, you have done some research about the perception of water when you have a guided tour versus a blind tour. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I found it fascinating.
One of the main ways in science that you can really distinguish between people's perceptions is through a blind taste test, right? So where you mask what the person is eating or drinking or trying, and then you ask them to rank or otherwise describe what they're experiencing. And so this is something that I've always been interested in terms of the ability of people who generally are untrained to be able to tell the difference between different kinds of water and tap water. Part of the reason why I do this in my classes is that I'm trying to send the message that students think they have to go and buy these enormous PET bottles of basic brands that they don't really care about for hydration. They don't understand that actually the tap water in Paris is excellent, and that if they aren't really looking for a taste experience, if they're not really trying to do what we're doing here today, then they might actually try the tap water because it's better regulated, it's at least as healthy. So I run this test to basically throw tap water and other waters into the mix and see whether my students can tell the difference, and often they can't. And this is something that I turned into a publication with an economics professor who was interested in the price point of different waters. So it's still something I'm very interested in. I think that just because it's difficult in a blind taste test to tell the difference between waters, that doesn't, especially if they're very similar in TDS level, that doesn't actually do anything to discount all of the stuff that we're doing here and enjoying, that you can still, you know, that's true for wine too, right? You can put a bag around bottles of wine and people won't be able to tell sometimes even the difference between whites and reds under certain conditions. But anyway, it was an interesting exploration of what our kind of fundamental abilities are versus what we think we're able to do or see or experience. And I think that's a really useful tool, particularly, as I said, when we're talking about hydration versus experience. So Martin, you weren't here for our many, many hours of conversation, but one of our really big points was that we need to distinguish those two. That if you're just there because you're thirsty and you don't care, then you shouldn't be buying, if you're from an area where you have excellent tap water, you shouldn't be going out and buying wasteful products, basically. But if you're there because you're like us, you're really excited by these different flavors, then you make that choice, right? And you think about what that means, and you, if you can, look for companies that make good environmental decisions. But it's this distinguishing between hydration and experience that we really, really wanted to kind of bring to the forefront here.
Elena, I see your Vichy bottle right in front of you. And that is now the interesting part about the American Vichy water, what I have in my hand, and your bottle. Because again, regulations are tricky. So my brand is called Vichy Catalan. Your brand is called VCH. And is this even Barcelona standing by me?
It's VCH Barcelona. And that's because we have a French Vichy Celestine, which is a beloved French brand, and the French will not allow Vichy name to be used for a non-French water. So I actually brought this out just to show you, because it's the same design. This is a smaller version. Same design, but they had to change the name to be able to export to France.
Yeah. So I love that we just talked about it, because you will see it on the American version. There's the VCH is on top of it, but nowhere else. So it's interesting that even the same water, even in the same glass bottle, can even slightly have a different name sometimes, based on the regulation. And I think that's a fascinating point as well. I love that. I just saw that there in your picture. This is great.
Yeah, it's very similar probably to champagne, right? You will probably get a big lawsuit if you write champagne on your sparkling water. And even in France, if you're outside of the Champagne region, you only can call it a sparkling wine and not champagne. I think it's the same idea, highly protective.
Yeah, mostly Cremant then is this. When it's the same idea, but it doesn't come from the champagne, then it's a Cremant. It's the same with Sekt in Germany. So Sekt has certain regulations, but it doesn't matter where it's coming from the region in Germany. But you cannot call a Sekt as a wine where they're just adding CO2 artificially. A Sekt needs to be, the carbonation comes from the second fermentation, the same with champagne.
I think the Germans are like the French. The French care enormously about what things are called. So especially when it comes to food and beverage, like they are going to care about what region exactly. That's one reason why I really enjoy the waters here, because people are so passionate about their local mineral waters, and they're so connected to those local sources. And it's not hard to find out where the waters come from, right? It's all over the label, right? They broadcast what part of France this is from and what types of soils, etc.
I think it's by regulation as well. In Germany, I know like it's even the size of the lettering needs to be a certain size where the source is located. So it's that regulated in Germany. What I think is incredible and good, and I would love here in America to have way more regulations on bottled water, what they actually have. Because right now they can do whatever they want. And that is crazy. And no wonder the consumer is completely like, I don't know, Martin, anymore. I get this email every day. Like, I'm going to the grocery store, Martin. I have no clue what the label actually says these days, because there's so much stuff on the labels and nobody knows anymore what's actually meaning is. So I think it's very important, and I would love to see the FDA stepping up their game to really like do a little bit more research on like, hey, bottled water needs to be better regulated. And then it needs to be on the label, like where's the source, what's actually in there. At least the main 3 mineral compositions should be in there. Calcium, magnesium, sodium should be on it. The TDS level should be on every single bottle. It doesn't matter if purified or non-purified. That should be required by law for the consumer, that the consumer actually see, aha, that is actually a natural mineral water. It has this and this TDS. Because the nutrition fact label, what we have here in America by water, is completely meaningless. It's all zeroed. So this is completely, yeah, it's another topic, and hopefully Michael and myself will be in power here in America at one point that we can really demand that, because it would be great for the consumer.
Yeah, we would love to do that. I totally agree. But I think, but hopefully, you know, we're reaching the end here of our show here, but I think what people hopefully taking away is the fact that water is not just water. We have just proven to you how different the waters can be. And the other thing is, it doesn't come, at least if you live in the US, easily to you. You have to put some effort into it. If you want to learn about wine, you have to engage with the wine. If you want to have the experiences and the conversations we have here, you need to engage with the water. And as Elena's saying, it's much easier in Europe, Germany, France, Italy, you know, fascinating. You just walk around and you have so many different experiences. But again, you still need to look for it. And if you live in a place like the US or other places that don't have that level yet, it's up to you. You need to engage. You need to look at the label of the bottle, find out where they're coming from, what's in the water. Is it a real water? Is it a processed water? So a new world will open up to you if you start engaging, and you will discover the same thing that I discovered 18 years ago. So I want to say thank you, Martin, for joining us here. Do you have some last words, some last wisdom for us?
I have just the last water in my glass for everybody. And what I'm always saying in my podcast, because Mike and myself doing a podcast as well, it's called A Water With. I'm always saying to the end, stay thirsty, stay hydrated, and drink real water from nature, what we have in our glass, from this beautiful glass, what actually Michael designed. Cheers.